My girl Caesar was so real when she asked God to bless these 20 somethings because these 20 somethings really need to be blessed. Welcome to your 20s, where we discuss, laugh, cry, and walk through conversations regarding your 20s. We're all still trying to figure it out. Welcome to the squad. I am your host, Chloe the Creative. Hello, my 20 somethings, and welcome back to this week's episode of these 20 somethings. Guys, so personally, this is why I will always advocate for people to take the leap of faith in whatever it is that they feel the need to take the leap of faith in, right? Like whatever it is. So in 2022, I decided to step out of what were my main studies at the time, which was motion picture medium. And if you know, you know. And I was like, I'm going to challenge myself and I'm going to dabble in marketing. So off I went and I took up social media marketing classes because I was interested in marketing. So I was like, I want to see what's going to happen. And that led my path into meeting Linathi because she was also taking the class. And one day she just randomly reached out to me. She was like, hey girl, would you like to be part of a project that I'm currently working on? And I obviously said, yeah. And that is how my sisterhood with Linathi came to be. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with Linathi. You guys are going to get to know her. You're going to see how much of an amazing person she is. And her work ethic, guys, is to literally die for. I'm so excited. First of all, hi Linathi. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, girl. Thank you so much for inviting me. And hi to your audience, your people, and our fellow 20 somethings. How are you today?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Oh, that's a very difficult question these days, right? So much is happening in the world. I don't think, yeah, I don't know. Do people still say, yeah, I'm just good? Because I just said, no, I'm good. But it felt like I was shortchanging. It felt like I was shortchanging myself. Yeah, I'm rambling now, but yes, how are you?
I really think there's something in the air. Like there's generally some. I don't know. Maybe is it the retrograde or it's just lifing, but there's just something in the air because I feel you when you're like I'm good, but I'm not really good, but I can't get into it because if I get into it, it's just gonna be a 2-hour episode. So I get you. I get
Yeah.
you. I get you. So I don't want to take the spotlight away from you. So I just want you to, briefly introduce yourself and like let us in on who you are and what you do. Yeah.
Ooh, I always get so, I'm not saying nervous, but when it comes to introducing myself,
Right.
um, I I don't know. Maybe it's because yes, I do things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people know I do things. But I think I also sometimes want people to know who I am, I guess, outside of those things. So the
Yeah.
whole introduce yourself becomes a bit more complex. Like, okay, I'm Linathi the writer, but also who am I outside of that, right? And that's also still something that I think most of the time I'm still trying to figure out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to cut the long story short, I'm a writer, I'm a maker of things. I'm a mom, I'm
Yay.
a friend. Yeah, I'm a boy mom. Yeah, I create stuff, sort of bringing the two worlds of picture and words together.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say I'm a photographer or I'm a writer, even though I know I'm heavily working, more oscillating between those two things. But it could be in any which way to create within those two worlds and try to bring them together. Yeah.
It's so mind blowing that you can randomly
connect with someone, right? And in this case, me and you connect with someone outside. I mean,
Yeah.
connect with someone who you've never met outside the internet, and they get to become such a huge part of who you
Mm-hmm.
are. And bringing you on the podcast, right? For me, it was a very intentional decision because you have become a huge part of my life, and
Mm.
you've like helped me get through some of like difficult moments in my life. And I really like in your introduction the fact that you mentioned really like important roles apart from your work, but the fact that you were like, oh, I'm a mom, which is
Yes.
my favorite thing right now about you, apart from your latest book
Thank
offering.
you.
But you're like, oh, I'm a friend as well, and I think
Yeah.
you are an incredible friend. So it's just crazy how like the
Thank
people
you. So
who
are you.
yeah, like the people who are meant to be a part of your life, you meet them at such random times, and they really are they just help you get through like difficult moments, and just like they just brighten up your life. And for you, to me,
Yes.
you are that, right? So I don't wanna
Oh,
get
thank you so
into like
much.
of course, I don't want to get into like
You want to get sentimental? We're here to get sentimental.
before we get into like the other questions, I just have two icebreakers for you. One word, just give us one word to best describe which stage in your 20s you are currently in.
Ooh, this is a difficult one. I don't have one word, maybe two.
Mm-hmm.
I had this, you could say maybe like an inclination of sort, this one morning where I just woke up and I just thought about Googling the meanings of the words obedience and acceptance.
Yeah.
And so I did that, right? To which obedience kind of sort of means you are showing up, right? In a
Mm.
situation that's not really favorable, but you're showing up nonetheless. And of course, acceptance is the full body, going into something and sort of engulfing yourself in that and being aware of, this is what's happening. And I found those two words interesting because I feel that in my 20s, that's where I am. I feel like I'm either at a stage where I'm living in acceptance, and then I have moments where I'm living in obedience to get to acceptance. And I think also even in the spiritual sense, people speak about obedience when it comes to God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also very important. Having to be obedient to a season, but no one really, I guess, describes, okay, you're being obedient and then what, right? There's something
Yeah.
on the other side of it, of which for me, having these two words sort of made that clear that sometimes you need to be obedient to get to a point of acceptance. So, yeah, I think that's where I am. It's very interesting, and I see this playing out, right? Almost, I guess, every day, if not every week, in my life, where I realize that, oh, okay, now I'm this, or the next day I'm that. So, yeah. What about you? I'm interested to know.
Me, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
like I think, I think breaking point. Oh, I'm in the breaking point because it feels like everything that I've known is like breaking away, and uh
Oh.
I didn't really expect it because it comes life comes at you so fast sometimes that you don't even like
Mm,
you can't even like um predict, or you can't even imagine this is going to happen next week, or this is so it really feels like I'm like at my breaking point, like, and there's
mm-hmm.
there's nothing around me, there's just so much pieces that have just been shattered, and it's like, God, like what happens from here? So I think
Mm.
that's where I am. But with you, in terms of how easy is it for you to get to that point? Like, Because then when you more kumangai right now, you make it sound so easy. How
Yeah.
do you still
No, it's
obey?
not.
It's not. Okay, but you're making it sound so
Not,
easy.
guys.
Like, you're making it sound so easy.
It's not. I know, but it's not. It's really not. And I think both of them, I mean, getting to a stage of, you speak about um, being at a breaking point, and I think I I experienced that. I think especially last year, going into this year, and so even leading up to having this sense of wanting to define these two words, I guess was also sort of propelled by that. So it's very difficult, because also to be, you can be obedient, right? But sometimes you don't necessarily understand, the state in which you must be obedient in, right? Okay, God, you're asking me to be obedient to get to a point of acceptance, but why kumele sibe lana to begin with?
Exactly.
So it's not easy. It's not easy. And even the acceptance, right? I've also realized that acceptance comes with a lot of grief. And I speak about this often these days, that if I'm not speaking about grief, I'm speaking about joy, or rather maybe even the in between of that, right? Because to
Mm,
say that you have accepted something, is also to let go of what is around it, or let go of other things that don't necessarily align with this thing that you've accepted. So
yeah.
that's how I feel. And this is with everything. I can't even pin this down to, one thing. Can't even say it's just career or just personal life. No, it happens everywhere. Because if I think about even my career right now, I feel like even before this year, I've had to be obedient a lot of times, right? And not
Mm,
necessarily understanding, why can't my career be at this point, or why can't I be, doing this and that. And I felt a lot like that even last year. I think first 6 months of last year, I felt like that, where I wasn't really doing anything. I
mm,
was really doing anything, except for what I felt like. This is actually very interesting. Like this popped into my head as I'm speaking. I felt like I wasn't doing anything, but I actually was, which to me was also interesting because, as people in our 20s, I think a lot of people might relate to this, but when you're not making money, it feels like you're not doing anything.
yeah.
And so at that time, I was sort of going through that push and pull of having to be obedient to, um, the fact that I am ideating, I'm thinking, I'm hibernating,
Mm,
and not really being able to envision what's on the other side of that. And second half of the year, everything sort of made sense, I guess. And we'll get to speak about that. But yeah, it's stuff like that, right?
mm,
So yeah, it's not easy. I think it requires a lot of thinking, and sometimes I'm present in that. Sometimes I'm trying not to sort of sink into the constant, trying to figure things out as well. You get what I mean?
yeah. Um, I think sometime this week I was going through my notes on my phone, and I came across this note that I made on the 7th of September last year, where I was going through it. Like, I was going through it, and I think, I was literally,
Yeah,
it was that time I was supposed to leave South Africa, but I didn't. And I was just like, I was trying to
yeah.
make sense of what was happening. I was like, God, like, what is this? Like,
Mm.
out of, we've prepared, we've
I was
spoken
with
about
you for
this.
that. I was like,
Yeah, you were
hey,
there.
I also had a moment where I was like trying to piece everything together. I'm like, oh God. Manje.
Like, where does all of this come from? But even then, sometimes I had to like sit in those emotions and sit in that reality of, you know what, like this is my reality. And
Mm,
at that point, I did feel like everything was on a pause, and I made a note. And it said that there is movement even in the pauses of life. Ubomi abomanga for real. And I was
mm,
listening to Msaki's song Ubomama,
yes.
and it just, you know,
Mm,
it reminded me that, like, I think sometimes we look at things from like a flesh perspective, and we don't really see it
yes.
even in spiritually, like things are happening, and sometimes it takes a while for our bodies and our physical to kind of catch up, but there's just so much happenings
Mm,
even in the stillness of life, you know. So
yeah.
yeah, it's a lot.
But it's still like, yeah, it's still difficult nonetheless, right? Because
Mm,
when you speak about, I guess, differentiating the flesh from spirit, that also kind of creates a conflict, right? Because
mm,
technically you're trusting something that you don't even know.
yeah.
You don't know,
Mm-hmm.
girl, right? And yeah, it's tough. I think sometimes I do want to so desperately make sense of things, from a spiritual point of view and be like, oh, okay, this is the math, this is this is that, right? But also, is it possible for God to change their mind or its mind? Those are the kind of thoughts that I have sometimes. I'm just like, uh, we think that, us sort of connecting with spirit guarantees us something, right? It guarantees us either clarity, a knowing, a calmness and stuff. But what if God is trying to figure it out as much as we are?
That's a very interesting take. That's an interesting take. But you know, like
Yeah,
back
I don't know.
in high school, I read like this other note that said that God has been at the end of it. Like so
Mm,
he's just taking us through it. So every time there's something happening, it's like, okay, God has written this, and he's now with us and like taking us through it and like giving us. So I feel like every time we go through something, that specific thing is preparing us for the
mm-hmm,
next, phase of whatever, stage we're gonna be in our lives. And that's because God has already been to
mm,
that specific stage, and he knows what you need. So he puts you through, or he allows you to go through those things, because he knows that you're gonna need the lessons for this next stage. um yeah,
I
I think
feel
he's
you. And I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I feel you. And I can definitely think of times where that has been very, very much relevant, right? But I think there's just something so haunting about the waiting game. Whether you're waiting for like a physical, manifestation or, clarity or whatever. There's, guys, the waiting game. It's not nice. It's
It's
not nice
not.
to think. It's not nice. And I think when we speak about the waiting room, again, for me, it goes back to obedience. The idea that you are in this space that you sort of have to, you just have to show up. You have to show up until it makes sense. Um, yeah. And I think maybe that's what God requires of us sometimes. I don't know,
Mm.
yo.
Girl, mind you, this is just like an icebreaker, and things are really so deep. Things are really so deep. But like that's how it is with me
Guys,
and
yes,
you.
guys, please.
I don't think we ever
Yeah,
have like
no. I
certain.
expected nothing less.
Yeah. We're always going
Yeah,
deep.
no.
Okay, let's move on to the
Yeah.
second icebreaker. One word. What is the one thing that's keeping you afloat in your 20s?
Ooh. Women. Off the top of my
Mm,
head, I'm sure I could maybe come up with a few more, but off the top of my head, women. There's a lot of just the energetic. I don't know how to describe it. It gives me goosebumps. From
mm,
friends to family to artists. Observing people from far, just the general energy of women has really kept me afloat on a personal level and maybe even on an external level. It's really, really beautiful to, you know, experience. I don't know if you can tell, I can't even put it into words. To feel held, to feel understood, to feel seen,
yeah.
and to sort of have a place where you can freely think, right?
Mm,
I've been through I've been many different Linathis, right? And in those different identities and stages and seasons, I don't think there's been one of those stages where I felt like I don't have the backing of the feminine, right? And that's something that I've really come to appreciate. I think we have a keen eye for whatever. As women, there's just a way that we see things that I don't think anyone can see them. And I know that sounds very obnoxious.
yeah.
That sounds very obnoxious. But yeah, so in my 20s, right now, in this present moment, it's women that are really holding my hand and going with me to places where I'm still trying to figure out, to places where I've figured it
Mm,
out, and so forth and so forth. I think now being a mom, man, that experience on its own, right? I'm seeing the world just in a completely different light, and I'm like, how did our parents do it?
they made it look
Screaming,
so
how did our parents
easy.
do it? Right? They made it look so easy. And yeah, just even that, right? People who, check in on you, people who support your work, and all of these things are the things that really make me feel like, oh, okay, I can keep my head above water during the season. What about you?
The word of God. I think that's the one thing that's keeping me afloat. The one thing that's keeping me afloat is definitely the word of God. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just like leaning more into that, and like looking through my Bible and searching for promises that like speak to my current situation or just currently where I am.
Yeah.
Like these days, just it's I don't know what it is. Maybe I think because 7 months since I've moved away from home, so everything is just so intense and just
Oh my God.
yeah, like we
7 months, guys. Time flies, right?
right, right. It's
That's
insane.
crazy.
Like time
That's
is such a weird
crazy.
concept. Time is such a weird concept.
Yeah.
So just like the loneliness kicking in, and it's like obviously this is something that I've prayed for, this is something that I want, and it's changing me in ways I never thought
Mm,
was possible. But when in life there always has to be a balance. The good always has to. There's always gonna
mm,
be bad. So I guess the bad is just the loneliness
yeah.
kicking in and just like wondering, did I make the right decision? Like what am I gonna do when I move back home? I miss my family. The other day I was
Mm,
looking at my dad's picture. I was like, my dad is getting old. And I sent it to my friend, and then she was like,
oh,
no, but like you haven't seen him in so long. So that's why you are able to realize that, like, no,
mm,
like he's actually growing. And it made me really sad. And then this morning I had a
Oh, that's
dream.
making me emotional.
This morning I had a dream where it was my uncle, my dad's oldest brother, and my grandma, and they were sitting in the car, and I was at my grandma's house, and I walked out the gate, and they saw me, and then they came out the car, and they looked so old. Like my grandma looked so old, and my uncle as well. And I cried so much in my dream that when I woke up, I was so sad. Like today actually hasn't been like the best day for me, and I was so sad. And I realized that like
Mm,
you chasing your dream comes with so much sacrifice, but looking onto the Word of God
yes.
gives me hope that like all of this will be worth it. Like there is something at the end of
Mm,
this that I'm gonna get. So I guess the Word of God is just what's
mm.
keeping me afloat. Okay.
You said so much that is so true and so relatable. I mean, yeah, like when you think about growing up, right? I think the idea of loneliness, I like the fact that you mentioned that, and the experience of it, and that also in the context of good things happening, right? I think that's something that we don't really prepare for. I think when you envision going into something that you've wanted for a long time, you don't really think that you're going to experience feelings other than feelings of joy or fulfillment and whatnot. But yeah, I can relate to that. Really being head down and like chasing so many things for the betterment of your vision, for the betterment of yourself, it
Mm,
does get lonely. It really does. And also I think also the loneliness of, again, you mentioned change. I was speaking to a friend of mine literally today that, even friendships look different the older you get, right? Birthdays look different. I had a fit this year about my about my birthday. I realized, my God, like I can't believe the older you get, the more responsible you are for joy on your birthday. Like it's no longer that thing of we wait for friends. Why? Like it feels like if you don't make an effort to engage your loneliness or engage the change, yeah, it's just gonna be there, and it's just, gonna be something else. So I get you. I'm veering off into a lot of things, like, but this is my way of saying I get you. I get you. I get you.
you word everything so perfectly, Linathi. It's just like it makes sense that you're right. Because it's like you just you word everything so perfectly. Okay, so I truly believe that, and it became evident to me last year that a lot of times in adulting, our childhood shows up, and it shows up a lot depending on
Mhm.
like which stage you are in, and what life throws at you. So I just want to know, right, like the kind of child you were, like just paint a picture of baby Linathi and how her baby Linathi has influenced the person that you are right now in this, era of your 20s and just your 20s in general, actually.
Ooh, that's a very interesting question. Okay, so I think a good starting point would be, um, the older you get and the more experiences you have, the little or the less or the fuzzier your memory kind of gets about baby you, right? And
Mm,
this is now, I think, maybe with my adult mind, without romanticizing, I don't know if you can romanticize childhood, but without, yeah, without romanticizing childhood, without thinking about it from a flowery perspective. So when I think about baby me, I think about someone that lived very much internally. I think I thank a lot I had a lot of thoughts. And I think I was an observer, and so much of that makes sense now that I'm older. But I think now with the path that I've taken creatively and personally, I've sort of translated that into the outward world. And that's how now I would say maybe I'm integrating baby me into adult me, right? Because
Mm,
younger me would observe, 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 and just move. But now older me is observing, verbalizing, unpacking, making sense of it all, not making sense of it all, and so forth. And another thing I think about is children innately are playful, but I don't know if I can remember myself being playful.
mm,
Like, I don't know. Maybe there's like a gap in my memory. But now that I'm older, um, I guess I want to be more playful. I want to really tap into what it feels like for me to have fun, right?
yeah,
And to be in that feeling, in that sensation. Um, and I think even, I guess the more I grow, and a couple of years back, even when I think about just being young, I think I've had fun, but I think even the fun that I thought I was having was maybe for a gaze that I didn't know was for. I don't think it was for me. I don't know if that makes sense, bruh.
mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, like like now I've been really thinking about what does it mean for me to feel a whole body sensation of joy and fun and play. And I think even with being a mom now also has kind of propelled me into that thought, right? Because I have a kid, and obviously kids want to play, and obviously also trying to build, I guess, build an environment where it's okay for my kid to be a certain way, right?
mm,
So I've really been thinking about that. Yeah, I don't know if that has answered your question.
it has.
Has that answered your question?
Because you're saying that as a kid you observed a lot, and yeah, do you ever remember a moment where you got insight on who you were to become when you grow older because of all the observations that you were making, and just like the kind of kid you were? Did at any point did you get like an insight, like a light bulb nyana on, okay, this is who I'm gonna become when I grow older, and these are the decisions I'm gonna make? Did that ever happen?
Ooh, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. But I can tell you something very interesting. My grandfather is a keeper of things, and he, while moving around, kept an old diary of mine, right? And
Mm,
so I was home the one holiday, and he was like, "I want you to look at this diary." And when you opened it, it was basically me journaling about having a book.
mm,
And it was very interesting to see. Like, it was basically me saying, "Hey, I'm Linathi. This is my book about da 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 da." Right? What feels like maybe even either journaling about having a book or the start of a manuscript. And I found that really interesting because one, I don't remember that, and two, like for me, like it was mind blowing that our dreams go even further back than we think they do.
yeah.
um, yeah, and so maybe that's, I think maybe that memory can answer your question. But I think for me, even till this day, I know the things that I am drawn to doing, but I do sometimes, I don't think sometimes I'm anchored in, oh no, I'm going to be this or I'm going to be that, right? Maybe
Mm.
now more than ever. Okay, cool. But before, like I'm thinking about when I had just left high school. I had no idea. I didn't even know what I wanted to study. um, and I think I even felt the pressure. And I see people having those conversations right now that when you're in high school and even younger, you shouldn't really be making such big decisions
Yeah.
that are supposed to have your life. Yeah,
Mm.
over okay, and so funda lento woku, and this thing is going to sustain me until I'm old. I'm gonna find a job and I'm gonna do this. This thing is going to build my life, right? Big decisions to make. So I left school. I think I've always been creative. That I've
Mm.
always been conscious of. But I think having an inkling into how big that could get, no, never. But clearly, from that diary, I had dreams.
I think that I always like to say that God like leaves little notes for us, and I think maybe that like little notes of reassurance, little notes of redirection, little notes of encouragement, little notes of
Mm,
help. And I think that maybe that diary for you and you participating in like cultivating it or writing it, it was like your little notes. Like when you look back, it's just like,
yeah,
oh, now it makes
definitely.
sense. Okay. Maybe at the time when you didn't
Yeah,
fully understand and like realize what was happening. But I think if we all look closely into our lives and we look at where we've been and our journeys, we'll realize that like they've always been little notes. And even though I hear
there's
you
always
when you
been
say
hints. Yeah,
we shouldn't like be making huge decisions in high school of where we are meant to be and all of that. But I think even then, like maybe there is like a little note, like maybe even if it's just one line, that like maybe you're not paying
I
attention
kind of feel
to,
you.
or mm,
I feel you because even when I felt like I didn't really know, I still gravitated towards something I ended up doing. So
yeah,
I feel you when you say that. Yeah, everything always works out the way that it should, right? For the betterment of who we are to become. So I
mm.
feel you.
Speaking on little notes, I want to speak about your latest book offering, which, guys, I got to be a part of, even if
Ooh.
it was at like towards the end of it. But yo, Linathi, yo, I was on Amazon the other day and I was looking at your books, right? Your
Yeah.
two books, and I need to get them because
Mm-hmm.
now I have access to Amazon.
Yes.
But I just
When a
I was
Barnes and
I was
Noble,
just reading
everything.
for real. But I was just looking at them and I was just like, Lunati, is your work is so intentional. It carries a lot of it carries like a lot of intention, a lot of vulnerability, especially the things I say
Mm-hmm.
to myself. That's the title, right? Like the things that I say to myself.
Mm,
And even the one that
yeah.
I worked with you, remember when I was like your social media manager for a short while. Um, and I was
Yes.
just like Lenati's work is you can tell that like she's intentional about the work she does. So let's talk about your latest book offering and just like let people know like in on it and yeah, what is the latest book?
Ooh. Yo, so last year, July, okay, so I'd been working on this idea since January, but the idea itself I think, had always been brewing, especially since varsity days. Some of my closest friends will know, like, I had always been obsessed by or obsessed with just the urban culture, all these groups coming up, the music, the fashion, the language, and all these things, right?
Mm,
So came up with this, what felt like a well-rounded way to discuss this obsession that I've had for years. Then I started ideating. That's how I was like, first 6 months of last year, I felt like I wasn't really doing anything, but I was clearly cooking.
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
I was cooking and I was being obedient and I was literally crying through it. I was crying through it because, again, it's not easy, right? And I think that's now the process before the actual process. So, July, I got an opportunity to work on this book, which is a very special opportunity because I finally got to work outside of myself. And by that, I mean to work with a team of really brilliant people who are really good at what they do, to create a book that is basically the focal point of the book is language, but we use language as a vehicle to explore fashion, music, modern culture, and trends, which is something that is very much alive in South Africa, always. But I really wanted to create something that was discussing the present because I felt like we've got the academic papers and other works that discuss the past, Bantula culture,
Mm.
and so forth, Tao, and whatnot. So I really wanted to create something that would feel like a snapshot of the present to say when we were looking back at the 2017s up until now, right? This is what was happening, or this is what we're doing. And maybe even further down from that, if we're looking like 2020 until now. And so, yeah, that was basically the project. The book is titled Urban on My Tongue. And just, you can't, I always say this about the book itself, that you can't really have the conversation of urban culture without factoring in the visuals, right? And so
Yeah.
I worked again with brilliant people that really brought the vibrant energy of the streets and really showed us what it means to be, what it means to be in the South African urban landscape. The book itself is split into three provinces,
Mm-hmm.
mainly Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and Western Cape. And my thinking around that was I was interested in the stories of these places. I was very cognizant of the fact that the culture sort of intersects even with the language. Eastern Cape, we've taken on some of the language from the Gauteng side, and the the era and some of the cultures that emerged that side. But I was interested in what are the kids doing from these respective places and what are their stories, right? What influences and what drives them. So that sent me down a research rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
of really trying to create a conversation that felt rigid in research, but also cool in context. And I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it makes sense.
It does make
Um,
sense.
and yeah, and even the decision to work with my editor and publisher, Mgateko, was very also intentional because she orbits the space of the academics, and she also opens the space of creativity, creative writing. And I felt like she would really understand bringing these two worlds together. So yeah, I have a lot of things. I could literally go on forever about this project. I'm super psyched about it. It was really, really beautiful, but also challenging to work on this book
Mm-hmm.
because this is also the first project I've worked on where I was making decisions from start to finish, each and every single detail. Imagine in my mind,
But
my 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 brain.
it came out so well, like so perfectly. And I did want to say that I really appreciate the fact that one thing about you, I think you are really um invested, or you're really passionate about ensuring that each generation has a certain offering, right? And like you said, that for the book, we in South Africa we do have offerings, like that date back to like history, that like offer certain understandings of the culture in South Africa, and but you want to propel that forward to other generations, and that's why urban on my tongue, sorry, was birthed. One of the reasons why it was birthed. So, and I remember there's this one quote of yours where you said that generational blessings doesn't only end. I think you said emotion healing, something about healing and generational blessings, and generational
Wealth.
wealth.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, generational wealth. Yes, it has to
Yes.
continue, and it's not just about breaking generational curses, but there has to be generational wealth. And I don't know if that is something that you are aware of, but I've observed that about you, that you're very passionate about ensuring that each generation has a new offering, and we don't always have to, just like be stuck on one offering from people back in the day,
From
which
one
we
thing.
obviously do appreciate, but we need new things to look into and like look back at. So I really appreciate that about you. It's such a did you know that about yourself? Like, is it
Thank you
a
so much.
conscious thing that you do,
I
or
think not in the way you're explaining it. It makes my heart warm. The way that you are articulating it really makes my heart warm. So thank you so much. But I do think the decision, like I said, the decision to want to discuss the present was something that really jumped out at me, because so many cool things are happening and people are creating really, really cool stuff. Even, sometimes I'd be looking at these trends and stuff, and I'm like, the people blowing up right now, going viral, and I'm like, yo, these people are so cool. And I think what I wanted to capture or do with the book, right? And maybe even the platform itself, was to sort of put across the message that the people that go viral and the people that create these things, right? They don't do it because they're trying to be cool.
yeah,
We're looking at people that are letting us into their spaces of passion, right? And there's this sort of romance that we witness either among themselves, where they share what they share and what they're passionate about, and their romance with the culture. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. I think about the guys who made Uchalabam, that they put out a video or reel doing that dance quite a while back, and now time lapses, someone else does the dance the way that they do it, and just like that, like pure alchemy, you're bound to be amazing, you're bound to be known by the world. So I think there's something very beautiful happening in the streets, and I know globally, people are really looking at South Africa, what's emerging, the music and whatnot and whatnot. But I think it was also important for me to put something out that would show people that we're not just looking at dances, you're not just looking at music, you're not just looking at, people doing things. There's meaning, there's depth, even when you don't think it's deep. It's deep for us. I think about this, especially with the dance as well, in terms of, our South Africans just come up with dances just out of nowhere. Love that.
yeah,
But I think there's something generally embedded in our blood, in terms of choreography, because even from Pantsula days, guys, we carry the spirit of Amapantsula. So even
right.
that on its own, yeah, that on its own, for me, I look at that and I'm like, it's deep, and I think that's what makes this maybe even above all else, that's what makes this project very special to me as Linathi, because I got to make and talk about the things that feel deep in the way that they feel deep to me. So it's
Yeah.
like, even if someone else can feel like, guys, it was just a music video, it's not that deep. All good and well. But I really got to put across my eye on the culture, right?
Mm.
And really pull something out of it really pull something out of the things that happen right in front of our eyes, and show people what I see from what's happening.
And do you wanna, like let people know where they can get the book? The guys, the visuals are impeccable. Like you work with Zembe. Zembe, I'm gonna bring him on the podcast, and you guys are gonna get to know Zembe. I love Zembe's work. Like his work is exceptional. Like it's
Fire,
Zembe, no words, right? And
fire, fire.
that you work with Zembe, so you guys definitely wanna get the book. So you wanna let them know where they can get it?
Yeah, of course. Well, this was, I think maybe let's start by talking about the decision to do things in the
Mm-hmm.
way that I'm doing them. I I mean, I've got two books out before this, and I was talking to Kateko on the live that we had not so long ago about how it really does get tiring to say, guys, I have a book out, please buy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for some time, I've really been wanting to, I guess, create something that would give back to people, especially creators, because I'm a creative and I know how hard it gets sometimes. So I created a Your Empty Fund. So that's an Urban on My Tongue fund. And the way that you can get a copy of the book is for you to donate towards that fund. Minimum 50 Rand donation gets you a copy. We would love for people to donate more if they're able to. Then, when we've gathered enough funds, those funds will be going to a creative that is in need, literally, of anything. If you're a visual artist needing supplies, if you're a photographer needing gear, and so forth and so forth. Yeah. So I encourage people to donate. It's not really about the buying. I don't really want to talk about it from a selling point of view.
Yeah.
uh, I encourage people to donate. I also wanted to think about this beyond the individual. The communities that we create as creators really keep us going. But I really also wanted to encourage, the institutions, the organizations, to really get involved as well. So if you are a gallery, museum, bookstore, brand, and so forth, looking to either support creatives or to acquire copies to keep, because this is also an archival project. We created something that is to be kept for a long time, right? So I really wanted to create something that would encourage even those structures to get involved. So yeah, if you know
Okay,
somebody
girl.
who sits maybe in a board, is a board member of a gallery or museum, and they have a bookstore there, and they would like some copies, or they would like to donate. Um, yeah, that's basically it.
So this is basically to like bring. I think I. This is where community comes in, right? Because this is more of a
Yeah.
community and like trying to make sure that like we all get access to to certain, for example, the book that will then obviously not only help us but not only tell our story but be there for like generations to come. So people obviously do need to play their part.
Yes.
Am I saying it right? Like I
Yes.
want to say it the way I understand it in my
Yes.
mind. But okay, so yeah, so it's more for
No, no, no,
community.
definitely. It's definitely that.
Mm. Okay, so we are reaching the end of the podcast episode, and I'm gonna end things on a very high, I don't know, relaxed note. And I just want you to share with us the top three of your favorite songs in your playlist right now.
Ooh, oh my God, that's so difficult.
What?
Okay, I really like I also this should be easy because sometimes I'm also a creature of habit where I just listen to the same song for like weeks on end.
Mm-hmm.
Um right now I've been actually listening to a lot of Afro beats. So Holy Ghost by Omale, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a song, I think it's Ginger, but I need to, guys, you're putting me on the spot. Okay, it's Ginger by Olamide. Um, and the guy that made Soweto, what's his name?
Don't ever know.
Wait, I'll tell you now.
I'm
I'll tell you now. It's
researching.
Victoni. Um, it's Victoni. So there's a song by Victoni. I think it's Colomental.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you say it, Colomental. So those three songs have been on my playlist. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's your top three.
If I go beyond that, we might be here the whole day.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna make sure we put them up on our Instagram so that everyone can. I feel like you can tell a lot about a person according to their playlist. Outside of what we've spoken about, I feel like people have gotten to know you more, and I do hope they get to check you out, guys. Go check out Linathi. I'll put up her Instagram handles. But yeah,
Yes.
that's the end of today's episode. This felt like
I don't want it to
a much needed
end.
catch up session.
Yes.
A much needed catch up with a friend. Thank you so much, Linathi, for
Thank you so
joining
much
us.
for inviting me.
Yeah.
Thank you for the conversation and for the platform. We really appreciate what you're doing. Young people always need spaces like these, right?
Right.
To just be themselves.
And
So thank you so much.
can I tell you,
Yeah.
you're one of the people who pushed me into, not directly, indirectly pushed me into getting a podcast, because I remember a week, I think a few before I started the podcast, I think on Twitter, and we still had like Twitter Spaces, and you were hosting, I think with a group of other writers, you were hosting a space, and I had joined the space and I was contributing. You were like, "Oh, you sound like you're on a podcast." And that week, you're like, "Oh, you sound like a podcast host." And that week, I had received word from God that, like, you need to start a podcast. Like, you need to do these two things. And when you said that, "Oh, you sound like a podcast," it felt like a confirmation what had been placed on my heart
Confirmation. That's
during that week.
beautiful. That's
So
beautiful.
yeah, you did a huge
I'm
part.
so
You've
glad you
been
followed that.
playing. I'm
It's
so
just been
happy.
amazing.
You also,
Everything about it, like everything about our interaction, the things that we've built, and the things that we have been to each other in our personal spaces, it's just beautiful. And even when you said to me, "Come on the podcast," I was like, yes. It's such a brilliant idea. It feels so good. Thank you so much for being patient. And I wish you the world of the best always, even with this platform. May it continue to grow. Yeah. Let's cut it before we get emotional.
yes. Thank you so much, Linathi. I appreciate you and I love you. And I know you
I love you too.
like the time zones are like, oh. So thank you for, even just making that sacrifice to join. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
That is
Me
the end of the
too. I love you. I wish you
episode.
all the best. Is
I
it
love you
going to
too.